I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast. I am so excited tonight to have on one of my OG guests from year one of not only the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast, but also the Cultworthy Classic, which has been since retired, but still available to listen to. On one of my favorite episodes of that show where we talked about duck soup, it's my good friend, Leo of Movies on Weed podcast. Thank you for coming back. I've missed you, man.
Hey, man. Hey, thanks. Thanks a lot, man. Shit, I've missed you too, Antonio. Been a long time.
It's been a long time. Life happens. Life happened to you. You had to take a little break and a little pause, but during that time, we still talked. We connected. We talked about movies, and finally being able to get you back on the show to talk about a film, man, that I think really speaks to both of us in many ways. And you're the perfect person to talk about this film with because it really speaks to where you live, the culture that's surrounded you, and where I am, yes, a Mexican American, I'm far removed from the cultural significance of the stories of this movie. And that's one of the things where I'm really excited to talk about with you today because I think you can help fill me in on some of the gaps and some of the cultural history of Los Angeles, where you live, and what it means, this film, the story it's based on, and just the significance of its message. But before we get into all that deep shit, how are you, buddy?
I'm good right now. I'm just trying to stay dry. I don't know if you can hear the background, but yeah, it's another rainstorm in beautiful, smoggy Los Angeles.
No, I don't hear anything, but it's really dry here after a long wet and cold winter. So you being in Los Angeles, me being in Salt Lake City, it's nowhere near the same thing. But yeah, let's kind of let the audience know what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about Zoot Suit from 1980. A couple years ago, I posted on Instagram that I was watching it in my office while I was doing some stuff, and you just started going crazy like, oh my God, that's such a great movie. I haven't seen it in ages. We should talk about it sometime. That was almost 2 years ago. And here we are now on video on the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast talking about this film, giving both of us a chance to revisit it. And I tell you, man, this movie does something to me. It's such an interesting piece of cinema. And the ideas that it puts across, where we are kind of doing an allusion to an actual story that happened in the history of Los Angeles, but done with such theatricality, right? It was a stage play originally in 1979 on Broadway, and then they made a film version of it. But what it does is it kind of walks the line between a film and a stage production because it shows an audience at the beginning seeing a production. And then it goes into a movie. So you're in a movie within a play within a movie. And that was distracting for audiences back then. But I think it was really the only way to tell this story effectively and still be true to the original material. What were your thoughts on this film the first time you saw it?
Dude, seriously, I want to say the first time I saw this, it just threw me off just for that sheer fact that it starts off as a play, then it's a film, so I'm just like, well, I mean, mind you, the first time I saw this, I want to say I was maybe around 10 or so. So I'm just like, okay, okay, this is a musical?
Right.
Or wait, am I watching a play? Is this bootleg or something? Because I mean, down here in LA, bootlegs, that sort of thing. But yeah, it was just so. so strange at first. But yeah, just rewatching it again, I started to really appreciate it more. So it's like, okay, this is a film about a play, but like it's it just seemed a bit more magical, but in a way it was like a hood musical.
It is a hood musical, man. like
Yeah,
like
and you don't really have those too.
Well, and then we also don't get a lot of musicals based on the Chicano Latino culture of Los Angeles, current day or in the past. Anytime there was a representation of our culture in a musical, it was often done very stereotypically, right? Like West Side Story. Yeah, that was Puerto Rican, but at the same time, you didn't have Latinos playing Latinos. You didn't see a lot of that. And, not to get nerdy, but even like some of the Asian cultures eventually got some of their own musicals made theatrically, like Flower Drum Song played by all Asians. We didn't get that. So until 1979, when this play came out, you really didn't know on a grand scheme about the Pachuco gangs, about the Chicano gangs of the 1940s and the 1950s, of how prevalent and how influential some of these cultures were. I mean, when you'd see a Zoot suit back in the day, you would immediately associate it with Cab Calloway or some of like the Hep Cats of like the jazz culture. You would not know unless you were a LA local or studied up on your history that was like the armor, the status of the Chicano culture of the 1940s. So I think this movie and this play was one of the earliest examples where we were able to teach the mainstream, especially the Broadway theater crowd, that this culture was real. And for some reason, history just didn't like to talk about how cool it looked and how hip it was. We were still in this idea that any kind of Latino culture was dirty or gang related or substandard to what the coolness factor would be of those days. It breaks my heart because the suaveness, the machismo that's presented, yeah, it goes back to the idea where it's like me being a second generation Mexican American, not knowing the language, because my dad wanted to raise me as an American, yet he wanted to show me films like this. He wanted to show me Cantinflas movies because he didn't want me to forget where I came from or, what the culture actually was and what they had to go through in America. So even though it's this glossy, stylized musical, it still really talks to the culture. And I think it's eye-opening for a lot of people who don't know about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the closest thing in the 90s, I think people got a touch of it was, I want to say at the beginning of American Me, when it's
Yeah.
kind of referenced that character. But I want to say it was this film in particular that, just like you said, it was just that awesome character. And plus, not to mention, of all people to play it, Edward James Olmos to play it, dude, he is a straight Pachuco Jiminy Cricket in this flick. It's just like, bro, just the mannerisms, that sense of just suave, cool, just so awesomely, just man, I don't know how else to say it, but dude, just being badass,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, a hood badass, and the fact to pull something off like this is just like, I don't really think we've seen a character like this, let alone the Zoot suit portrayed as awesome as this flick.
Seriously, when it comes to just genuine coolness of a character, this movie's so little known that I feel if there was a resurgence of this film and people saw how cool Edward James Olmos is as El Pachuco. I mean, he sings, he dances, but he's also very menacing. And the lingo of Chicanos that has now kind of adopted its way into modern culture, and I'm not going to say gang culture, that's how it's represented in movies like Blood In, Blood Out. We already talked about American Me, or the other film from the 80s that he was known for, Stand and Deliver, where they have Lou Diamond Phillips playing a Chicano, which that always makes me laugh. I mean, he was great as Richie Valens, but, talk about, not having the correct appropriation of casting. I'll let it go on that one because homeboy represents. But yeah, like you want to look at people like Elvis Presley or Steve McQueen. You know, you look at these guys that were just so cool on film and people wanted to emulate and be like. If this film had been a hit, you would have had all these guys wanting to be El Pachuco, right? You would have all these guys wanting to talk like him and act like him and dress like him. And maybe it just came out at the wrong time, but I'm going to put him in the top 10 of coolest cinematic characters ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And plus, not to mention, including especially the one thing that really does hold up is his dialogue in particular. I mean, you do get that slight sense of it from just like you were talking about Blood In, Blood Out, except that one's a little bit more
Yeah.
exaggerated, a little bit in American Me. You can kind of get that hint of it from, just like you said, Lou Diamond Phillips in Stand and Deliver. But yeah, this was the ultimate badass. I mean, especially if you go back to that scene in Zoot Suit where the reporter is talking about Los Angeles, he immediately stops him and gives him the proper, correct
Mm-hmm.
Spanish iteration of Los Angeles. I mean, dude, in certain cultures, in certain spots around LA, dude, they will correct you just like he did in that, which I particularly watching it, rewatching it, I just thought that was just so badass. I loved it.
Well, I mean, so it kind of gets me on this next point is that this film is often credited of introducing Spanglish to American cinema goers. You know, like all of a sudden you have people mixing in the Spanish and the English vernacular together, and they kind of make fun of it when you see the generational gaps, which I think is so great. It really speaks to the Latin American culture, like my dad used to talk about when he was a kid, where you know when you've got these first generation Mexican American kids growing up in the 40s and 50s wanting to find their own voice and their own look and their own appeal, but they have the very traditional hardworking parents who are like, why are you wearing that monkey suit? You know, what are you doing? I don't work 12 hours a day so you can slick your hair back and put on this stupid hat and then go do all these things that you shouldn't be doing, carrying switchblade knives and getting fights with, you know, other Chicano gangs. And it's interesting to me because we still have those same conversations today with our kids, right? You know, where you've got that working class family. Maybe they were rowdy when they were younger, but now they're like, I'm putting food on the table and you're wearing baggy pants and going out and doing all this crazy stuff. Like it shows that, yes, those generational gaps are never ending. It doesn't matter what era it is, it's always going to be there. But seeing that early example of these guys wanted to look good when they go out. They wanted a peacock because they didn't have much in their everyday life. They didn't have much when it came to their job or maybe their school or friend groups, you know, because they were oppressed. But if they could dress up and go out at night and go dance, and that's one of the coolest things too about the film where it talks about the cultural gaps because when they're in the club and you see that there are also the African Americans there too. The guy points to the sign. It's like, hey, you're here on the wrong night because there was colored night and Latino night. So even back then, man, like it's interesting how both sets of cultures are minorities in the white person's eye, and they just have to exist in this. I have one night that's dedicated to my particular color. And the movie doesn't necessarily focus on that, but it knows that it has to make a point that that was the life and the culture back then.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's just that little those little nuances where it's mentioned, it's like it did happen. It did exist. And it was just like, you know, you have to acknowledge that this was during that time. And it's like, yeah, I mean, a lot of people kind of see us and it's just like, yeah, you know, they're they're day laborers because they're Mexican. It's like, yeah, no, no, okay, guess what? Yeah, we are gonna put on the Zoot suit. We are gonna peacock the night up. And it's like, dude, for a few hours, dude, we are gonna rule this town. It is
Right.
just, yeah, dude, it's just, it's it's referenced, dude, and it's awesome. It's great that it's brought up because it's like I feel that that's history that has to be acknowledged. It has to be.
When we talk about the opening number, we talked about the fashion between the two, the Chicano Night and the Colored Night. It tells a really strong story. And we've seen enough films, I'd say like Malcolm X or some of the, other films that represented the racism and the segregation of those days. We don't get to hear a lot of those stories when it comes to Latin American culture. So I love the idea that this is a stylish and glossy musical to deliver that message, because we really didn't see a whole lot of those stories told. Because as glamorous and glossy as it is a musical, it actually tells a much more serious story. And that is the Zoot Suit riots of the 1940s and the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial. Whereas the first real publicized trial of a group of, Chicano youths who were blamed for the murder of a gang member. And even though they didn't necessarily murder the guy, like they were in part of the group that did it, it was the trial and how they were treated just because of their culture and their background that really is the base of the story. But to tell the story, we go through the main character of Henry Reyna, who's based on the real guy that was involved in this. And it's an interesting way how we develop that story, because it starts with the family, right? He's getting ready, trying to patchwork his Zoot suit together the best he can with his friend. His friend borrows his dad's jacket, which is oversized, but with the Zoot suit, it kind of works. It shows that they were very they had a lot of ingenuity, right, of putting these things together and creating this style. But they're still going to sit and have tacos with their parents before they go out and have fun. And then you see when the daughter comes in and the dad's like, what is that dress? Where's the rest of it? It just shows that fathers, no matter what culture, have that same kind of worry and concern and pride that they don't want their kids to go out and look like hooligans or hussies. And it just really speaks to like the family unit of that group. There is a sincere care and concern. He even says, don't take your switchblade with you. Like, cause he knows what's going on out there. It was a good way to help humanize this culture, which is a terrible thing to say, but for some groups that aren't familiar, they need that. They need to see this culture humanized, or else they're only going to look at the gang related stuff, at this, Chicano Pachuco style, and not think about the life behind it. How did that reflect with you?
Well, that one really kind of hit close to home because I mean, this movie did come out in, what was it, 80?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think another film that kind of referenced kind of that sense of family it wasn't until like years later till you had Henry Nava's Mi Familia,
Yeah.
where you could actually see that family dynamic. But yeah, you could definitely see that. And I mean, even though it is a film, it's like in the Latino culture, that is family. That's the dad. He always has to sit down with his kids, and just tell them, hey, don't do anything stupid at night. I mean, worry about your future, because it's like that's why they come to this country, because hey, guess what? You want a better life, and it's like they think about that. And another thing that kind of gets mentioned, especially, is when he shows a bit of pride for his son. I mean, he has to sit down and has to do a shot with him. And it's like, I mean, you could be like, oh, wow, they're drinking alcohol. No, when your dad takes you down and he's going to have a shot with you, that's like one of the biggest achievements, you can ever get.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, no, that's it. And he even tells his woman, he's like, yeah, dame la botella. Give me the bottle.
Give me the
already.
bottle.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, guess what? I'm gonna have a shot with my son. It's like, dude, that's you've made it.
Yeah.
In your father's eyes, you've made it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, dude, that's a celebration, dude. That's you can't get any higher than that when you do a shot with your dad.
For me, man, I was 15 years old in Rosarito, Baja, and that was the first time I had a shot with my dad. We had a bottle of brandy and some Cokes and some cigars, and I was 15, and we were sitting in a hotel room. He's like, tonight's the night where we put this bottle away. And I was like, really, Dad? And I was always really close with him, but you're right. There is a new established relationship with your father, or let's say your paternal figure. It doesn't even have to be your father. It could be an uncle. It could be a older brother, someone that is kind of introducing you into the world of being an adult, of being a man. And that is the one that I think is the scene that really got me too, because it just took me right back to sitting in a hotel room in Rosarito with my dad, sharing a bottle of brandy and a couple of Cokes, where it's like, wow, I recognize this connection. I don't recognize or connect with much else in the movie because that wasn't my culture, but this connection right here, that's exactly how it hit me too, man.
Yeah, that was a great scene. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of held back a tear on that when I was like, yeah, especially. I mean, yeah, I mean, you do get that from the uncle every now and again. Well, to be honest, in the Latino culture, yeah, definitely, you're gonna do a shot with your uncle. That's gonna happen. But dude, it doesn't get any higher than your old man
Right.
doing a shot, dude. And it's like, dude, the fact that you had that with your dad, dude, cherish yourself. That's like that, dude. He just gave you an Academy Award.
And we haven't really talked about like how funny the movie actually is, because yes, it's a dark story about a dark event in history, and the songs aren't all necessarily whimsical. They might have whimsical themes, and the musical score might be upbeat, but if you listen to the lyrics, they're really, really raw about the culture, about the discrimination of Latinos in this culture, but also there is this thing that there is a lot of, I'm going to say, self-discrimination along some Latino communities. And I feel we experience it in this country today, where it's like, you know, like the father and son relationship, where it's like, I'm a hardworking Latin American who I have to prove more. I have to work twice as hard to prove myself to the people that run this city. And you're out being a hooligan. Like, what are you doing? Like, there's a self kind of discrimination amongst that too. But the humor involved in it really makes it feel better, especially in the club scenes where they're all just kind of talking shit to each other. For example, fucking Bertha is like one of my favorite characters in this movie. She's like the one girl that everyone's had in the club, and she's not the best looker, but they know at the end of the night, if they strike out, they're going home with Bertha. And I think it's Henry's friend that has one of the best lines about it, is like, she don't know the difference between being cool and culo. And that just made me fucking die, because it's like, I know what that word means.
Dude, yeah, yeah, you know what? The generations have changed, but trust me, Bertha still exists.
Bertha
She is
still exists.
alive and well in the Latino culture.
I think she's alive and well in every culture. She just has a different name for each one.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, in every Latin family, dude, we all know a Bertha.
I do like the fact that the 38th Street gang, their gang, is kind of like a melting pot, right? Because there aren't just Latinos in there. There are some Caucasian dudes. There's a white boy in there, but he's been raised in the culture. And I think we all know people like that. It's the same thing with like white guys been raised in black communities where, okay, the color of my skin, yeah, it's obvious, right? But my culture is this culture, and this is the culture that accepts me. I've known too many guys. It's also the same reason why guys get sucked into things like neo-Nazi groups and stuff like that, where they don't find a home in what they think their own community should be. So the community that adopts them is now their community. And sometimes they get shit on for that, but I also think it makes them stronger, and it makes them a little bit more loyal to that group. And if there's one thing that this film does portray about that gang, is they're not the most aggressive gang. They're probably not the most respected gang, but the sense of honor amongst themselves and loyalty and trust, it might make them the strongest gang in that area because of how much oppression they have, because they're so poor and they're jumbled and they're mixed up. Like, that brotherhood that you see throughout the movie after they get blamed for this and they're sitting in jail, and you see the cops trying to break one of them apart so they can sink the whole group. And they're like, no, man, these are my brothers. Like, I'm not flipping on anybody. Like, this is my gang. And that's another thing that I think is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And yeah, trust me, believe it or not, a lot of people like no, they really won't believe it that yeah, there's that white dude in there. No, yes, being Mexican American, I can tell you, yes, they are those white boys hanging out with Mexicans that absolutely grew up with them. I mean, you're not going to see them kind of like when they were portrayed in colors, more like it's actually very familiar, like I guess you could say, like Christian Bale in Harsh Times,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, they get wild like that. But yeah, absolutely, they are brought up, they are hanging out with the culture, and it's like, dude, they're absolutely one of us. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's that sense of honor, no matter what, and loyalty within each other. That's what keeps everybody together. And absolutely, they recognize that. And yeah, hey, once a Mexican mom takes you in, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white, dude.
Right.
Yeah, your
Your
family. That's it.
family. Yeah, no, 100%. I like to talk about the cops for a second. We got Kurtwood Smith, who, shows up early in his career as one of the detectives of this case. And,
A chubby Kurtwood Smith. You gotta mention
right.
that, dude.
One of the things that I find really interesting about this story is the fact that it's almost one of those things where the cops almost would rather not be involved. Let these guys kill each other kind of thing. But because the cops are called and people are caught, now they have to be like extra hard and extra shitty to these people because they are in custody. But it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like the cops don't even want to be a part of this. But now that they are going to be aggressive. They're going to be discriminatory. And that's kind of what kicks off the second act is we are seeing these real unjust actions done towards Henry and his gang. And in the meantime, Rudy is out on the street and he's not part of the gang and they could flip on him, but they're not going to. But it's interesting to me why they are so aggressive towards these guys. They don't care if they're guilty or not. They just want them off the street. So they will do anything to keep them in jail, to put them behind bars and clean up the streets of these Pachuco gangs. And that's where Tyne Daly's character comes in, where she is Alice Greenfield. She plays this organizer that is kind of like exposing social injustice. And she's helping represent their case to show that the police are being discriminatory and not fair and not just, and really just trying to put them away for the color of their skin. It's an interesting thing to me because it is the traditional white savior, plot point, but the movie is not afraid to call that out. Like Henry literally says that to her face after like he kind of says that he has feelings for her. They have like this love connection. And when she kind of shoots him down, he points out what he really feels. And that's like, you just want the recognition that you're standing up for this culture. Do you even really give a shit? Or is this all for you? Is this just for your career and your ambition? And that still is one of the things where when we talk about social justice warriors, when we talk about people who are trying to protect, cultural indifferences and appropriations, is it really for the culture or is it just for personal clout? And that's one of the things I liked about this movie is that, okay, we're going to have a white savior and we're going to like them, but we're not going to shy away from the fact that it might be bullshit.
Why does that sound very familiar?
Right?
I mean, yeah, what year did this movie come
Yeah,
out?
to 2020.
Yeah, yeah, right. And yeah, I mean, dude, it was talked about back then. I mean, dude, I remember watching that. And at first, I really, one, I couldn't take into account that whole little slight love collect connection with Tyne Daly.
Right.
But you know what? He was locked up for a minute. So after a while, you know what? She doesn't look that bad. But yeah, I mean, her fighting for Henry and the gang, I mean, dude, back then they could tell that, cops, they they just wanted to close a case on these guys just to get rid of them. But I mean, reality is it's like, dude, that's not going to go away, dude. I mean, just injustice that's been around since God knows when, and it's like, is it going to go away? I mean, I don't know, but just the fact that that was brought up and it's still prevalent now, I mean, what can I tell you,
Yeah,
man? I
what can you
mean,
say? Like it
yeah, I could tell you that, man. I mean, we've dealt with cops down here, and yeah, they don't like us still to this day. I mean, where is she? Tyne.
we need your help. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
that's why I
we
think
need you.
cultural significant movies like this are so important. I didn't really understand until I saw Do the Right Thing and Boys in the Hood, where black police officers versus black youth. It kind of goes to that generational gap again. It's like you have a culture that's so desperate to be accepted by a culture that might not ever accept them, and that makes them in sense more dangerous than the white cop. Like it's portrayed in these movies, and that's kind of like that side of this story that they're trying to tell. We don't see any Latino cops in this movie, but it's like these guys don't have anyone really on their side. I mean, the attorney's on their side, but he's also getting paid, right? Like it's for clout and it's for glamour. And at the end of the day, does anyone really care about these boys with the exception of their families, right? And their girlfriends and their partners. And that's where I really want to get into this next part with Edward James Olmos's character. He kind of plays multiple roles in this movie because, first of all, he's our narrator, right? But then he also kind of acts like the conscience of Henry. He's like the devil and the angel on the shoulder. But then when you watch the movie a little bit deeper, you also think that he's the harbinger of things to come because he's also the one who's kind of putting ideas in people's heads like, hey, get that switchblade knife. Hey, take this guy out, hit him, don't let him do that. And then on this last viewing I had, there's also this idea where I think he also might be the devil. Like he's really spinning the web here. And it leaves you wondering, is he just the narrator telling the story? Or is he the devil and he's got everything laid out and he's showing you how he is leading Henry down this path? Like, it's such a deep character and it keeps getting deeper and deeper every time I watch this movie. What are your thoughts on Pachuco?
I mean, dude, I tried reanalyzing him over and over. It's like, was he his angel? But I mean, at the same time, it's like, dude, he's just like you said, he's the devil too. Because I mean, there's that scene where Henry's talking with his dad, and the dad wants the knife from him. I mean, how does he get that knife back? The Pachuco hands it to him.
Yeah.
So it's like, dude, this is his Jiminy Cricket, and it's almost just like that. I guess just that spirit of that Pachuco, that sense of rebellion that won't die. It won't just disappear. It's just, I guess, that sense of rebellion, just to keep it alive and well. I guess you could say almost that warrior spirit, so to speak, that can sing and dance
Yeah.
awesomely,
Yeah.
by the way. But yeah, I mean, that Pachuco character, damn. I mean, he's just a force of nature,
Yeah.
and it's just one of those where he picks it out. It's that cholo conscience,
Yeah.
that Pachuco conscience
Yeah.
of him that just has him. It's like, dude, it's just focus on it. And on top of that, when Henry tries to point that out to him, hey, you told me to do it. Hey, I didn't tell you. He just shies
Yeah.
him off. It's like, no, dude, this is, yeah.
It's your life
It's like, oh yeah,
essay. It's
yeah.
your
I'm
story.
pointing you in the direction. Yeah, I'm pointing you at the direction, but don't you dare blame me. But yeah, I mean, I just see him as his Pachuco Jiminy Cricket.
It's the
That's what it
perfect way of
is.
putting it. I didn't even think of it that way. It's like, oh, this guy is literally the Jiminy Cricket of Henry character.
Yeah, except it's not just good. It's like, dude, he's gonna take you down some shit.
Right, right. Well, and then he also is kind of like a master of fate at the end, where, you hear the news story of what supposedly happened to Henry after he got out. And then he's like, well, that's a sad ending to this story, but it doesn't have to end this way. And then he shows you like 4 or 5 different things that could have happened to Henry. It's like, okay, well, Henry actually went into the army and came home with a Purple Heart. and then he had kids, and he's still alive to this day, and he married Lupe. You don't know which reality actually is, and that's the beauty of it, is that the ending has to be ambiguous for the film to still feel magical. Because if we followed the real story of the guys and the tragedy of that, then there's no hope. And the idea is that if you're going to watch this dramatic telling of this story that's also got a lot of fun and fantasy and whimsy and style, well, you want to have a little bit of hope at the end, but you also are clearly given the point that that hope is fantastical. It's kind of made up, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But at the same time, being Latino, it's like, dude, we first off, one, it's never happily ever after,
Right.
ever. Okay, this isn't a Disney film. Somehow there's always a tragedy at the end. It always ends with a down note. That's why he literally just stops the film and he gives you alternate
Yeah.
endings. To which, yeah, to which in certain ways I've come across characters and they've all had those different endings that have gone from, like, they started in the gang life. They were considered that dangerous, that badass. And next thing you know, yeah, he does join the army, comes back with a Purple Heart. Then there's the ones that, what was it? One of them, he ends up
Addicted to
becoming
heroin.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, one does get addicted to heroin. Another one, the kids end up in college speaking Pachuco slang, and it's like, dude, I've met those people before. So it's like, yeah, they all those endings seem relatable, especially in LA.
Yeah.
I've seen them.
I want to talk about the legacy of the film really fast, So sadly, the film doesn't really have a great critical history. There are some critics that liked it, but I think it was just too ahead of its time in what it was trying to do, being a cross between a theatrical production and then a movie. And that's where a lot of people complain. We're like, I like the story and I love the songs and I love Edward James Olmos, but why does it have to be a mix of both? I think it's just an artistic choice and it works for me. It might not work for everybody. I think if this came out now, it would be looked on a lot more favorably because we've seen other forms of entertainment take those leaps where they mix two things together. Like, I thought musicals are going to be dead forever and now they're back again and people are freaking out about them. It's an up and down cycle, and this just happened to come out at the wrong time, at least cinematically, to get the appreciation. But when it comes to cultural appreciation, it did get submitted to the Library of Congress as a significant cultural and aesthetically respected thing for the culture. It needed to be preserved. So it gets that. And then a lot of people, and that's what we're talking about on this podcast, are rediscovering this film on Tubi. They're rediscovering this film on YouTube. They're seeing people talk about it on podcasts and on TikTok videos. So I think that it's going to have a resurgence and a reemergence. I recently saw that it played in 70 millimeter at a theater in LA, and it was sold out every night. So I think we are going to see a reemergence of this film, and I think it's a really important film to do that. So my question to you now is, culturally, because this is where you're at, you've probably heard the stories of these guys. What are the echoes of the culture that were displayed in this movie to the culture of today, and what can we learn from them?
Well, one, that we are still dealing with the police. We still have that sense of pride in our nature. And dude, this is definitely something that needs to be revisited. I mean, this has to come back. You know what? Criterion Collection. Why isn't this up there? I
Right.
mean, you already have Luis Valdez's La Bamba, but this one needs Zoot Suit.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, the just on a whim, I ended up looking it up and it's like, dude, the Zoot Suits are selling.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they do exist and there is that culture, but it's like, it's still, it's coming back. I want to say it's really, really coming back. And it's something, like you said, it has to get rediscovered little by little. It's being found. And this And you know what? This has to go on Criterion Collection. This has to be.
Yeah.
This has to go up there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, have Edward James Olmos on there. Have him. It's like, dude, how can that? How awesome was it? The fact that he pulled that off, and it's like, dude, to hear him talking that Pachuco voice, dude, I'd love to hear that.
Right. And like just 5 or 6 years later, he would, play Jaime Escalante in Stand and Deliver, where he is essentially mocking the Pachuco voice, but, with style and with grace. And that's another great movie too, man. Edward James Olmos is such an underrated actor. Like the roles he's given are there's a very select roles because he doesn't fit every type of character, right? Like you can't have him be the romantic leading man and everything. He always has to be like the dad, like in Selena, or he has to be the teacher, or he has to be the gangster. But what I like about him is that when he chooses his roles, he tries to do them in a very kind of paternal way, not too villainous, because he knows that the villainy would be very easy for people just to say, well, there's just another scary Mexican guy, right? Like, that's why I
Right.
love the roles that he chooses, where, yes, there may be some sinister ones, but there's a respectability to it. And this is a sinister character, but he's so goddamn charming and suave, and you want to look like him, you want to act like him, even though he's a bad guy. It's like when Yul Brynner played bad guys, right? Like he always looked so sharp doing it that you almost wanted to root for the bad guy, and that's kind of the energy he gives off here. And I love that 2 years later, when he played Gaff in Blade Runner, my favorite movie, Ridley Scott's like, dude, just dress him like Pachuco. That's what I want. Like, he's a badass. I want him to be in the same goddamn outfit, just like a smaller brimmed hat. But yeah, I saw Blade Runner before this, and then when I saw him in this movie, I'm just like, did they just have him wear the same outfit? Because it works. I love it.
It's like I bet you any money. I don't think Ridley Scott would admit it, but I don't know. And being Ridley Scott, he might just ask him. It's like, dude, of all people, why did you cast Edward
James
James
almost.
Olmos? If he were to turn around and say Zoot Suit, I'd be like, okay, I get it. Absolutely, I
Yeah,
get it. That
right.
makes sense. But yeah, I mean, there's him being very underrated. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see certain actors nowadays, and it's like, dude, they do that same thing. And I feel that almost really was ahead of his time in a sense that it was like, dude, you really didn't see a lot of actors do that,
Mm.
especially because yeah, they get a lot of typecasting. I mean, look at one of the characters in there. I believe what Marco Rodriguez, he plays Smiley.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, for the most part, he always played a villain for
Yeah.
like years
Yeah.
until, yeah, I mean, what was it? He came out as a coach in Eastbound and Down, and it was like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, you don't want to end up there, but I mean, you see actors nowadays, they can pull that off. I mean, look at Ryan Gosling. I mean,
Yeah.
someone that was considered to be a heartthrob, but next thing you know, it's like, dude, he's singing and dancing in La La Land. I
Yeah.
mean, he does it in Barbie, and not to mention absolutely hilarious in what the Nice
Nice Guy. I was
Guys.
gonna say Nice Guys is my favorite performance of his, but then also Place Beyond the Pines and Drive. Like he can still play a hard ass too. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
I had a lot of hate for Ryan Gosling because of The Notebook for years. And after Drive came out, I was like, I gotta say I like this guy. It hurts me. And then he just keeps getting better and better with it. And hey, getting put into the Blade Runner sequel, I was like, no way Ryan Gosling can replace a Harrison Ford type character in this movie. And damn it, he did it. So yeah. Well, to kind of get back
yeah,
on track with Zoot Suit, one of the things that I really feel about this movie is the fact that this movie did fail the box office, and it kind of failed critically, and it got swept out of the theaters really quickly and kind of became lost for a while. I mean, like how I discovered it was with my dad on HBO or something way back in the day when I was maybe 10 or 11, and he didn't know about the movie, but he knew about the Sleepy Lagoon murders and he knew about the Zoot Suit riots. So we watched it together, and we both loved it. But without this movie, we wouldn't get La Bamba. And to me, La Bamba, in my opinion, is the all-time number one musical biopic ever. I don't want to hear about Ray. I don't want to hear about any other musician biopic. La Bamba is the one for me. And Luis Valdez nailed it with that. And if it wasn't for this movie, we wouldn't have gotten it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and plus, not to mention his brother in there. That uh, what's his name?
Daniel Valdez.
Daniel Valdez. Exactly. He not only did he do the music for that as well. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, dude, those that brother combination
Yeah.
right there. I mean, yeah, very, very underrated. I mean, dude, they should have been big. They should have been big by now,
Yeah.
bro. And I mean, plus, not to mention all just that music alone. Try listening to the soundtrack of Zoot, not tap your song and little by little like sing it later in the day. I mean, you're gonna be singing it all day. I mean, I was thinking about Marijuana
I
Boogie
was
the other
just gonna
day.
say Marijuana Boogie is my jam, man. It's like the best song in the movie.
Dude, and I mean, not to mention, I mean, a lot of people from, I guess you could say that, especially when that resurgence in the '90s was swing, and it was
Yeah.
like, dude, it was like, yeah, you could definitely see the, Zoot Suit that could have been playing too during that time, and it was like,
Well, I mean, one of the biggest swing hits of the '90s was "Zoot Suit Riot" by the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, and I guarantee you that everyone that listened to that song and danced to it had no idea what the context was. That it was based on real Zoot Suit riots based off of this murder trial, and the lyrics of the song itself are really about that. But no one listens to the words because they're too busy flipping around, right? Because it's too much fun. And oh god, I'm
exactly,
so glad you brought that up because that is one of the things that pissed me off about that swing boom of the late 90s, how it totally gentrified the coolness of it, right? We didn't see Latinos in the swing boom. We didn't see hepcat African Americans in the swing boom. We saw the white guys in the Gap commercial doing swing. We saw these white guys that were formerly in ska bands that switched over to swing bands because it was the cool thing at the time and it was the hip thing to do in Los Angeles. Like it totally gentrified the style and the culture. And that's why I think this movie is important because you can go back and watch it and be like, oh, wait, did I not know that this was actually a very Latin American thing back in the 1940s and 50s when this music craze happened? That this style comes from not white people? I mean, that's another thing that people have to understand with this movie is that it's going to teach you some shit that you didn't know.
yeah, yeah, that's true, and that is kind of mentioned. I mean, in that early monologue when when Edward James Olmos is talking to the crowd, he tells him it's like, dude, it's just, don't really question this, but just kind of just run with it, just go with it,
Yeah,
and it's like, dude, yeah, by going with it, you could be like, oh, okay, all right, I'll listen, I'll just dig along to it, and it's just like, yeah, I mean. I was gonna also say that Gap commercial, dude.
that
I was
damn
thinking
Gap
about that.
commercial.
But but yeah, I mean, definitely. It's something that I mean people really have to acknowledge. It's like, yeah, guess what? Yeah, the suit. That's ours, man.
Just another appropriated thing from a different culture. But
Absolutely.
yeah, 100%. Well, man, I got to say, like, closing thoughts on this movie. It's not for everybody, but I think everyone should see it at least once. See it for at least the history so they can look into the history, see it for the appreciation of the culture, but also see it as an example that, man, like families and brothers and friends, those aren't necessarily uh, consolidated to one particular culture, every ethnicity has these relationships. It's what makes us all human. It's what makes us all connected. And the fact that like people don't consider that other cultures are so similar to them in the sense of how parents love their children and they want to protect them and they think they're fucking idiots sometimes because they are. Like that is universal. And this is just a film that really kind of shows it that it not just in this time, but back in the 40s, not just the dominant culture and ethnicity of this country, but the minorities as well. And the fact that Eldridge James almost looks banging in a zoot suit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean anybody that ever thinks of Edward James Olmos, it's like, yeah, you're automatically gonna think of American Me, but no. After watching Zoot Suit, you're gonna be like, okay, this is the character.
Yeah.
This is what he's known for. It's like, dude, you can't get any better than this. Absolutely.
Do you have any last thoughts on the film, man, or anything that you'd want to like tell people who haven't seen it on like why they should?
You should watch it just for the fact that one, yes, Latinos can make a musical.
Yes.
Okay, the Valdez brothers were absolutely awesome. If it wasn't for this movie, we wouldn't have had La Bamba. And if you haven't seen it, I mean, you're slipping. That's it. The Pachuco is going to come for you.
He is.
Okay,
He's gonna come for you, essay.
essay. Yeah, but
Oh,
relax. Just watch the movie.
I love it, man. I'm so glad we were able to get back together and have a conversation about this film. I'm going to give you the time now to kind of just let people know what the status is of your show. You just recently had a real like reconnection of some great podcasters. That was really exciting. So let's hear all about it.
Yeah. After taking a little time off, yeah, just pretty much going back into reviewing flicks, but also trying new things. If you can find me on all your podcast platforms, you can listen to me being joined with my last one with Mega Man, and I had my buddy Danny
Danny
Retro
Retro.
Historian.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny Retro, and yeah, just a lot of alcohol, a lot of cannabis, and just shooting the shit. And it's just it'll go all over the place. You got to listen to it.
Right. Like that's one thing I can say about your. We talked about this on one of the episodes that you were on before, where it's like there's just a lot of great, prominent Latin American podcasters out in your area that all have their own little followings, like King Mexico and Danny Retro and Mega Man. And when I see you guys get together, I told you this before, it makes me sad that I'm sitting lonely here in Utah, one of the few cinematic podcasters, that I'm not out there with you guys, you know, just shooting shit, smoking, drinking, and talking about movies and talking about fucking life, man.
Dude, we gotta bring you down. We gotta bring you down. It's either that or we gotta go up there. I'll take Ramos with me. Maybe I'll take let me see, some of the guys from Rambling Alcoholics, dude. Oh, man, yeah. Dude, we gotta bring you down.
We'll connect. We'll
We gotta
connect
bring
for
you down.
some time. Yeah, absolutely. My show, The MILF and Me, my co-host just moved to San Diego, so I know I'll be going out there. It's only a couple hours away, man. I'll make that trip.
That's perfect. Absolutely. It's gonna happen. Stay tuned,
Stay
everybody.
tuned. So, everyone, you can find the links to Leo stuff on the show notes of this episode, but also in my Cultworthy Partners page on thecultworthy.com. Go back and listen to our previous episodes that we recorded. We did a great one on killer sequels, which was absolutely fantastic, where we talked about like RoboCop 2 and Karate Kid 2. But then we talked about Duck Soup on the Cultworthy Classic, and that was just a great episode about a great movie. And the fact that he picked it, that Movies on Weed picked a Marx Brothers movie for that episode, is still one of my favorite podcasting moments ever. So it's been great talking to you, and I just can't wait to do it again.
Hey man, I love it, man. I love doing your show. Thanks for inviting me on once again.
Absolutely.
Awesome time with you.
Everyone, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Later.